Welcome to Stifel's Sightlines podcast, focusing each week on a topic or two important to investors.
Well, greetings and welcome to the Sightlines podcast. This is Michael O'Keefe, Stifel's Chief Investment Officer. Well, we're just over a week away from the U.S. elections here in 2024. And of course, everybody wonders, well, what is all this going to mean for markets, portfolios, investment opportunities, all that kind of thing? And we know that, elections are pretty tough to predict. So anyway, I wanted to provide sort of an overview of how we're thinking about things, also make a little bit of a plug that Brian Gardner, Stifel's Chief Washington Policy Strategist, and I are going to do a couple of webinars for clients, one on the 29th of October, and then the next one a couple of days after the election. You can go to stifelinsights.com to see information about that. Anyway, I want to get into sort of the what's up with the election and again, some investment considerations. So let's start with sort of where we are with the election. And a variety of surveys get done, of course, to try to understand where the voters' heads at. And the top topics are inflation and prices, jobs in the economy, and immigration. And among voters in general, 47% of voters picked one of those three as their top issue. And then when we look at independent voters, that bumps up to 49%. So those are really three key issues in this election. When it comes to checking out the polls and sort of the predictive models, the bottom line, I think, is that the elections are a bit of a toss-up. So right now, for example, in swing states, polls are showing Trump has on average about a 1% lead in the swing states, but that's sort of a flip from where Harris was about a month ago. And so, there's always a chance it could sort of go back, and also I'm sure there's margins of error. So that just, to me, is signaling a very tight race. Now, the polls are also indicating a stronger possibility that the Republicans could take over the Senate. They could win the Senate. But when we look at the House, there's 32 seats considered a bit of a toss-up. And so future control there is really pretty uncertain. What I would say is Brian Gardner sort of frames out what he thinks the various scenarios are. And he actually assigns a 70% chance of a divided government, meaning that across those three segments, right, the presidency, the House, and the Senate, that each party wins at least one of those, so that to get anything done, they have to work together. So what that means, of course, is a slower pace of change. Now, when it comes to the sort of the state of things and how people are feeling about it, I think everybody's a little bit emotionally charged. That's pretty typical, right? And then also, I would say that people are a bit nervous about the potential for essentially a contested election. So if things are so tight, it takes forever to figure out what's going on, or one side sues the other side and all that stuff. And then, of course, even more dramatically, I think, is the consideration, the potential for essentially civil unrest. And while, one party will always say, oh, it's the other party that is going to potentially go that direction, the reality is, in different ways, we've seen such activity across the political spectrum in a way. And so that's just another sort of factor. And think of it as people are uncomfortable with that, right? And appropriately so. And that can affect the investment and market dynamics, just people getting a little bit spooked, and that can sort of drive some volatility. Now, so the takeaway here is we really don't know where things are going. We do know that, when you think of sectors, you can think, financials probably do a little better under Trump than Harris. You can think that energy, like oil and gas, would probably do better under Trump than Harris. And then alternative energy would do better under Harris than Trump. And you kind of go through and sort of anticipate sort of the policies and their influence on sectors. But again, given the potential for divided government and really the uncertainty, it's pretty hard to position specifically, in my view, for a specific win and then hope that it pans out. So the idea of sort of waiting it out staying diversified, staying ready is sort of how we position. And that's in part as well, given the idea that there are other things that probably in the end, like most of the time with these elections, there are other factors in play right now that are having much greater influence on the markets. The obvious ones are inflation. What does that mean for the Fed? And are we going to see any chance of a resurge of inflation? All of that sort of leads to monetary policy that then has an influence on the economy. So, of course, where the economy is going is in focus. Markets are kind of richly valued. It's been a good year. So people are a little nervous about some downside risks just from almost like a resetting based on valuations. And then, of course, in the end, when it comes to equities, earnings will remain in focus, right? How strong are they? And all that. Now, there obviously are also the possibilities of external events. We know the escalation risk in the Middle East, as well, honestly, with Russia and Ukraine in a way. The sort of the worries and frustrations about the wars that are going on around the world it can also trigger volatility. And so finally, I'd say, as we discussed in the last episode, interestingly, and I think importantly, the idea of fiscal trajectory, where we're headed in terms of deficit and debt, is coming a little bit more into focus. You'll see it sort of dripping through the media cycle. And again, some known industry leaders starting to raise their voice about that issue. So again, it's just a little over a week to the election. I would invite you to check out our client webinars. Again, October 29th, and the other date specifically is November 7th. StifelInsights.com will have a little entry where you can check it out and see the sort of the Zoom link to get to that session. We'd strongly encourage you and invite you, I guess I'd say, to join us. And again, Brian's really, you might appreciate, deep into this situation, and he'll have some really, I think, insightful observations during that session. So listen, thanks so much for checking out this week's episode, and we'll see you on the next one. Take care.
Thanks again for listening to Stifel's Sightlines. Be sure to subscribe wherever you're listening to automatically receive each week's podcast in your feed.